We just heard you at the piano. Now you sit here with me, and we're going to talk about life and music. You're one of the most hard-working pianists in the business, I think. I mean, you play an immense repertoire of contemporary music, of classical music. I'm very, very happy that you received this prize. It takes a while until one calls oneself a musician or a pianist. You study and you learn, and at some point you think, okay, now I have reached a point where I could call myself a pianist. When was that point for you in your career?
Well, maybe never really, but however, from the start, I felt that even if I would not become a professional musician, this instrument would mean something extremely strong for me. The first time when I put my finger on a piano keyboard, I felt something magnetic, and that was it really. Then I thought that I could make other things in music or maybe in other territories. I was talented for maths. But obviously the piano is a marvelous instrument because you can play all the possible notes on your own and all kinds of music. You can reduce orchestra, you can play chamber music, so you can live on your own. And that I like very much. I'm a social person, but I'm also very independent. I share my isolation sometimes, and I like to play an instrument where I can decide, well, now I spent one day or 1 month with Bach or with this piece by a young composer, and, well, nobody will interfere.
What is the poetry of the piano for you?
It depends on the piece you play or what you do with it. There could be no poetry at all. There could be only speculation or muscles training. What is extraordinary is that it can open to any kind of world, any kind of imaginary world. And I like this flexibility. You know, one says sometimes you can imitate any instrument and the voice at the piano. You can make melodies, polyphonies, abstraction or paintings, anything. And this, yes, gives you the chance to open your life to any territory.
How did you find your way to contemporary music? Because I don't think it's different in France and in Germany. Usually the pianists, they practice their classical repertoire, they practice Chopin etudes, Beethoven, and most of them never will see a contemporary music piece because it's very often not on the curriculum. And how did you discover contemporary music for yourself?
My first piano teacher, Geneviève Lièvre, who was a flute player, playing the organ and composing for Avant-Garde theater in Lyon. And she, well, taught the piano for food, you know, was a very inspired person who was very aware of the last news in new music. And she taught her students with any kind of music, from ancient music to the most recent music, including music from India or North Africa, so that I've been educated with the new, well, any kind of new music as being the most natural thing.
Now, of course, today, which is different from earlier times, I think, there are many composers who don't have the piano as an instrument. We have now composers who are flautists or singers, guitarists, and sometimes they approach, at least this is my own experience, the piano as a, in German we would say Fremdkörper, as a foreign object, and sometimes they do stuff that doesn't work, simply. They have fingerings that are impossible, jumps that are impossible. I'm sure you had the situation with composers that they demanded something that is actually impossible to play, but what is your reaction to this? How do you deal with the situation?
Well, there are two cases, I think. Yeah. Something that is really impossible. This comes because the composer is not really professional. Or something that is not practical. And this happened all the time in all the history of music. I'm sorry to say, but Mr. Beethoven, who was quite a genial composer, composed very often very unpractical things. And, well, we love him. However, we make an additional effort in this case.
You said an interesting thing in the text that is in the brochure for the Siemens Prize, that you are a bit disheartened by the loss of conviction for avant-garde music. That there's a tendency that people say, oh, avant-garde is dead, and that it is replaced by more conservative, more reactionary movement. And could you tell us a bit more about this thought of yours?
Well, there have been extraordinary, a golden age of avant-garde after Second World War and let's say until the 80s. And some creators that are representing this generation are still with us and compose very fresh music, astonishing. But you know, in the history of art, things are moving all the time, of course. So after these kind of periods, there are periods that are more manieristic, or more slept, or more commercial. Call them as you want. It's always like that. And then one waits for the next one. So we are lucky enough that people live very old nowadays. So there are still people from this period. Of course, composers, from younger generations who are interested in opening new doors, making new challenges, and not always looking backwards with nostalgia.
Yeah, it's a difficult discussion, I find, because on one hand you see that certain ideas of the avant-garde have come to an end and you cannot explore them further. You have to open new doors for music, yeah? But at the same time you don't want to go back to Romanticism and 19th century, and I think it's a discussion also very very violent in France, no? Because there are also tendencies are very conservative, let's go back to tonality. Do you have
It's an eternal question. You know, you can spend a life visiting museums and seeing academic, boring painting, very well done, by the way, by very respectful artists, but this is not what attracts me personally. So I live the life that I intend to live. I like to be surprised, even disturbed, every day in my life. So this is my way to discover and not to fall asleep in my own small world. Beethoven is an excellent example because he was so transgressive and, shaked the entire consensus up, really. But on the same way, he was able to communicate incredibly. So he was able to make his revolution, but using very simple items that are considered, by the way, by specialists of communication like models for good communication. And yes, that's probably the way to do. That means, how can we be creative? How can we dare to bring the society forward, but at the same time, of course, to keep in contact with this society? We don't speak to an abstract world. We are interpreters, we speak to humans, and we are happy to enrich our contemporaries' life and not to provocate them and to disturb them. So this balance to find, of course, is what for me makes sense in life.
And what is more fun for you, to work on something that has already been interpreted a lot of times, and you have, which is an interesting term, this collective memory that you have to speak to, or to discover something new that has never been done before on the piano?
Well, I like both, and they are not so far away, because somewhere the goal is always to go to the piece, of course, nourished by the work of generations of interpreters or musicologists or writers. But somewhere the goal is to try to give a new birth to the piece. That means to come back to the original shock that the piece could give. So somewhere one should play also old music like new music.
If you could decide to have 2 weeks of touring with a program that you're playing really, really well in big concert halls with lots of success, or you could go into a monastery for 2 weeks and practice some really, really interesting piece that you like by Schumann or Beethoven, what would you prefer?
Can I cook also a little bit in the second case?
Of course, yeah, no, it's the perfect situation to work, that's you should imagine.
Well, the second one corresponds very much to a part of my nature, but obviously, I must be honest, I choose a life, I think, combining both dimensions. I think interpreters show the result of the work, they realize them on stage a social frame, but they prepare it in isolation. And I think you can really get an intensive and senseful result if you combine both dimensions in your life.
The composer Ludovico Einaudi just recently played a concert at the North Pole in front of icebergs on a raft. Where would you like to play a concert in a really unusual place?
Oh, I think there are many situations, a part of the traditional Franz Liszt piano recital that many colleagues do. One that I did recently that I loved and that I will redo again is to play the entire Catalogue d'Oiseaux by Messiaen at different moments of the day, from dawn to midnight, in different locations, outdoors among the birds with marvelous antiphonies by their sunset choir, or in closed acoustics, in order to feel better what inspired the composer. That means the time of the world and the space and the music of the nature. Yes, this brings us also closer to nature. This brings also the audience to travel, and not mostly the musician. This was, I think, a great experience. We can win a lot trying to, well, make music, as we say, in very different kind of circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea. Thank you very much, Mr. Aimard, for your time and for talking to us and Crescendo Musikmagazin.